The following program is an original production of WYCC PBS Chicago.
Good evening. I'm Chris Bury. Welcome to this week's episode of In the Loop. Tonight we look back at some of the biggest stories that have legs, stories we've covered in depth that deserve a second look. First up, money talks. And for those who get arrested, it springs them out of jail on bond. But for those in Cook County who can't come up with that cash bond, typically 10% of whatever a judge sets, it means they sit and stay in jail. In fact, in 2015, more than 1,000 Cook County inmates spent more time sitting behind bars before their trials than they did after they were convicted. And the vast majority sitting there now have not been convicted. And one of the biggest critics of the bond system is the Cook County Sheriff himself, Tom Dart. He is among many leading voices calling for an overhaul of a system that clearly penalizes the poor.
Hey, come on now.
A tense confrontation between an off-duty Chicago police sergeant and an Indianapolis man who allegedly failed to drop his weapon when asked is caught on camera and ends in gunfire. 25-year-old Joshua Beal is shot by police. The victim's brother, Michael, is arrested after attempting to disarm the off-duty officer who killed his brother, and becomes one of the more than 8,000 men and women held in pretrial detention at Cook County Jail. A judge set bond at $500,000, which meant Michael would be responsible for 10%, or $50,000. Katrina Walker has been in Michael Beal's shoes. She spent 9 months in Cook County Jail awaiting trial. The mother of 3 was charged with retail theft last year after stealing a $23 outfit for her 4-year-old daughter.
I lost my job, my family. I lost relationships with my family. You know, it was real hard.
Unable to meet the $1,500 required for the $15,000 bond set for her, Katrina took a plea in an effort to get back to her children and family.
There was a lot of girls in the same situation, waiting to get bailed out. Their family didn't have no money. They didn't have the money. So it's like when you go to jail, your family be locked up too.
The Constitution is violated whenever bail is set in an amount that is too high for the defendant to post, and it results in disastrous consequences for the taxpayers, for the defendant, and for society in general.
Attorney Matthew Piers is among those filing a class action lawsuit against Sheriff Tom Dart and the Cook County Circuit judges. It alleges that thousands are being illegally detained in Cook County Jail due solely to their inability to pay their cash bonds. Here in Cook County, it costs $150 a day to keep someone locked up in pretrial detention.
Looking at someone like Katrina, who was in for 9 months, that cost taxpayers a lot in the direct cost of her incarceration, over $35,000 in fact, but it also cost Katrina and her family and her community.
We caught up with Charlene Grace of the Chicago Community Bond Fund as she was working to secure the release of Michael Beal, the brother of police shooting victim Joshua Beal. Charlene is part of a coalition of lawmakers, attorneys, and advocates working to end the cash bail system in the state of Illinois and across the nation.
It's a very serious determination that these judges are making.
Okay, if everybody would kindly stand up and raise your right hand.
If you let a dangerous person out, of course, that's dangerous to all of us. On the other hand, the decision to keep somebody incarcerated, and that is a decision that a judge is in fact making when he sets a bail at an amount higher than a defendant can make, that has drastic consequences for that defendant. Consequences which run the range from higher likelihood of being convicted, higher likelihood of getting a worse prison sentence, higher likelihood of completely disrupting that person's economic and social and personal life so that reintegration into society at some point becomes that much harder, and we pay for it. All of us pay for it.
But there are still some who believe cash bail provides an incentive to comply with the courts.
Some of the opposition comes from people who think we are a safer society with a cash bail system.
There is no evidence, zero evidence, the cash bail system has worked. None.
Cook County Sheriff Tom Dart, who was a defendant in the lawsuit, agrees.
You won't be any less safe without a cash bail system. That in jurisdictions where they've done that, they haven't found that to be the case.
One thing both Piers and Dart can agree on is that Washington, D.C. is a model for reform. The district has all but eliminated the cash bail system. That has saved nearly $400 million a year by releasing defendants into supervision programs that are far less expensive than keeping them behind bars. The district also found that 90% of the defendants show up for their court dates and 91% of them stay out of trouble while free. For people like Arnold Julian, the class action lawsuit is just one piece of the puzzle. They also want to see a change in the law.
With the current legislation that we have on the books in Illinois, it says that a judge must consider 30 different things before issuing the bond. Bond court on average is 15 to 27 seconds long, and there's absolutely no way you can consider 30 things, especially when you have 100 to 200 people coming through bond court on a nightly basis.
The system itself is not working. And we need to change that. We need to change this system so it's not a system that cares about how wealthy you are.
Matthew Piers maintains that the Cook County Sheriff and his staff are working diligently toward helping to reduce and eliminate the cash bond system in Cook County.
The issue of as far as how quickly can we get things in motion, this will take a little bit of time to legislatively change from a bail system to a non-bail system.
Until that day comes, those on pretrial detention will have to rely on organizations like the Chicago Community Bond Fund, which last Thursday, with the help of Black Lives Matter and an anonymous donor, secured $50,000 for Michael Beale's release. He walked out of Cook County a free man and into the arms of his family. Since we first reported this story, Governor Bruce Rauner has signed into law the Bail Reform Act. The new legislation is set to transform the cash bail process. But a Sheriff's Department spokesperson tells us Sheriff Dart believes it does not go far enough to end the so-called bail trap for poor inmates. Nearly 5 months into his presidency, Donald Trump is facing organized resistance on some big issues, from climate change to immigrant rights to health care reform. But the biggest protest so far came just after his inauguration. Here in Chicago, more than 1 million women marched in solidarity with millions more in Washington and around the country. What began on Facebook as a plan to gather a group of women in solidarity to deliver a message to the incoming administration about women's rights and human rights led to a day for the history books. More than 500,000 people, women and men, marched in one of the largest demonstrations in the history of Washington, D.C. Peaceful protests mirrored in cities around the world.
This girl is on fire.
It's been a heart-rending time to be both a woman and an immigrant in this country. Our dignity, our character, our rights have all been under attack, and a platform of hate and division assumed power yesterday.
We choose love.
This is about our country. I didn't shed blood to defend this nation. I didn't give up literally parts of my body to have the Constitution trampled on.
More than 4 million people turned out worldwide to support the Women's March, and over 600 sister marches in cities including New York, Los Angeles, London, Paris, and here in Chicago, where an estimated 250,000 people participated.
That there's so many people out here that we are blocking the march route. So once again, they underestimated us.
sisters doing it for themselves.
After today, I would hope that women would continue to fight, that group by group, whatever your main issue is, that you would continue to fight for that, to stand for that. And I think collectively we can continue to do some things. A march by itself does nothing, but our numbers are meaningful.
The Women's March was a peaceful demonstration, but the night of Trump's inauguration was a different story. Violence erupted, playing to the president's ongoing narrative about Chicago, one that started during the campaign.
In Chicago, they've had thousands of shootings, thousands, since January 1st. Thousands of shootings. And I'm saying, where is this? Is this a war-torn country? What are we doing?
In his inaugural address, Trump kept it up, portraying American cities as war zones.
And the crime, and the gangs, and the drugs that have stolen too many lives and robbed our country of so much unrealized potential. This American carnage stops right here and stops right now.
The president has not followed up on his threat to, as he put it, send in the feds to Chicago to stop the violence. But Donald Trump did ask his daughter and senior advisor Ivanka to help craft a federally mandated 6-week paid maternity leave plan for new parents. That's part of the president's budget proposal to Congress. But critics say women's health care in general and Planned Parenthood in particular face tough new obstacles under the Republican plan to repeal and replace the Affordable Care Act. When Donald Trump was on the campaign trail, he got some of his biggest cheers for his tough talk on Mexico, from building the border wall to dismantling the North American Free Trade Agreement. But once in office, Trump heard from many who benefit from NAFTA. Here in Illinois, for example, farmers sell more than $200 million worth of corn every year to Mexico, their biggest foreign market. And we discovered the potential fallout to ending NAFTA here in Chicago could hit hard in other ways.
This is all Mexican product over here. This is one of our largest station areas for Mexican product. As you can see, we have quite a bit of it here.
Maximino Hurtado is the co-partner and president of Amigos Foods, a meat and seafood distributor on Chicago's southwest side. He says 10% of his business depends on products exported from Mexico.
Doing business with Mexico, it's no different than doing business with packers in the U.S. It's so convenient for us, just pick up the phone, talk to our vendors in Mexico, and within a week, we expect shipments of fresh product, which is very important to us.
Ribeyes are pretty expensive.
Hurtado worries his business could lose millions of dollars if President Trump fulfills his promise to overhaul NAFTA, which allows open trade between the U.S., Canada, and Mexico.
NAFTA has been a terrible deal, a total disaster for the United States from its inception.
President Trump blames NAFTA for the loss of manufacturing jobs in the United States. In addition to renegotiating the treaty, he has also threatened to impose 20% tariffs on Mexican products to pay for a wall along the border with Mexico. But Hurtado says in the end, consumers would pay for President Trump's actions.
It all trickles down. It'll be a domino effect, okay? The U.S. would implement whatever tariffs that there are. Those tariffs would be implemented by our vendors in Mexico. We have to implement those tariffs to our customers. But tenderloins, this is your fillets. The price difference between this and the Americans is probably about $3 or $4 a pound.
Hurtado's business would not be the only one hurt if President Trump is successful in his bid to restrict trade with Mexico. Teresa Mintle is president of the Chicagoland Chamber of Commerce.
Chicago has a very codependent relationship with Mexico. Over 200,000 people in Illinois are employed by trade with Mexico. We have a huge influx into our economy from trade with Mexico. Upwards of $8 billion a year comes through Chicago because of what we're able to export down to Mexico.
Mintle says Trump's decisions about trades with Mexico could have a widespread impact on the entire Chicago area economy.
Anyone who cares about their neighborhood and who cares about jobs in our region should be concerned about some of the discussion that's happening around trade right now. We are the city we are today because we are a city of immigrants and because we're very open to businesses from all over the globe, and we export all over the globe.
In fact, one of Chicago's biggest foreign trading partners is Mexico City, second only to Toronto in terms of trade volume between Chicago and cities outside the country.
That trade is represented by metals manufacturers, food processors, business services. They all use each other to help foster that economic activity.
The relationship between both cities has grown even stronger during the last 4 years, after Mayor Emanuel launched the Chicago-Mexico City Initiative to promote tourism and commerce between both cities.
I think one of the things that we need to begin to consider is the next strategic dialogue.
Juan Ochoa is the U.S. coordinator of the initiative. He says open trade has benefited both cities.
There's about roughly 100 corporations from the Chicago area based in Mexico City. There's over 50 direct flights from Chicago to Mexico City, and there is about 1.5 million folks of Mexican descent.
Ochoa says maintaining friendly trade relations is vital for the economic prosperity of both cities.
Relationship between cities under the current situation that we have with President Trump has never been more important. While he's interested in building walls, cities, global cities, are interested in building bridges and building upon the success that they already have from a commercial, a cultural, and educational perspective.
No matter what happens to NAFTA eventually, Hurtado hopes to be able to provide Mexican products to his customers.
I'm optimistic that it's not going to happen, but if it does happen, we definitely will see loss of jobs. I know our company would have some, significant job losses because of that.
President Trump now says he won't pull out of NAFTA, but does hope to still make major changes to the treaty. For many Chicagoans, the gun violence they see in the news every day is just that, safely tucked away in the news and far away from their daily routines. But the violence is now spilling into a place that has no racial or economic lines, Chicago's expressways, where anyone is vulnerable. Since 2010, there has been a nearly 800% spike in Chicago expressway shootings. In the Loop's Lauren Cohn examines some solutions under consideration.
Nearly 6 months after the shooting death of Jonathan Ortiz, his family gathers at the spot where he died to say a prayer, post pictures, and honor his memory.
That we're going to get justice for Jonathan David Ortiz. He is not just going to be another statistic on the 290.
Jackie Ortiz says on September 29th at 5 in the morning, her son and girlfriend, Alexis Garcia, were driving along I-290 near Laramie Avenue when gunfire shattered his Jeep window. Jonathan Ortiz died shortly after. Garcia, also shot, survived.
He looked over at me and he said, "Baby, I got shot." And that was the last thing he said.
Jonathan Ortiz was an aspiring rap artist from Chicago's West Side.
I was a shorty bumping Cuban, was a good day.
His family says his music helps them through each day, and it's time for the violence to end.
We have to put something in place because this is getting out of hand. It is out of control. No mother should go through this. Not at 22 years old. He had dreams, big dreams.
There were 47 shootings on area roadways and expressways last year. That's 10 more than the year before and more than double than what we had 2 years ago. And that is why Governor Rauner is pushing for 200 officers to be added to the state police force.
Those officers will allow us to send more patrols to the Chicago area, to the expressways, to counter the violence that has spilled over onto the highways there.
Illinois State Police supports the addition of new officers, especially as the violence continues to spill over from Chicago's neighborhoods. The Illinois Troopers Lodge 41 Fraternal Order of Police, the union representing state troopers, says their manpower has decreased by 500 officers in the last 10 years. Andrew Hennigs, general counsel for the Chicago Crime Commission, suggests going a step further and adding video surveillance, saying it would significantly increase public safety.
And what that means is when law enforcement can't be in a million places at once, given the budget restraints, even though they are trying to hire more people, this ensures that motorists, as I said, that are trying to conduct their daily lives, aren't there alone. and that law enforcement will be watching.
But Amisha Patel of the Grassroots Collaborative, a nonprofit working to change public policy, would rather see resources spent not on policing, but on programs in the most troubled areas.
If we have a choice of having more resources in our neighborhoods, the choice should go to actually going directly into our neighborhoods to do violence prevention programming like after-school programs, or street intervention like ceasefire, or trauma-informed case management.
For the Ortiz family,
how do you just jeopardize millions of people going to work, going home, going to school? Just driving. You don't know. You only have one life to live. Live it to the fullest. Because that's what John did. John lived his life to the fullest, and he was a very happy young man.
They want justice for Jonathan in safer roadways, safer neighborhoods, safer for the next generation. For In the Loop, I'm Lauren Cohn.
We love you, John.
The governor's office tells us that the cadet training program for those 200 new Illinois State Patrol officers is on track for this summer at a cost to the state of about $10.5 million. And finally tonight, we end our program just as you might like to finish the end of a long day, by hoisting a tall, cold one. Talk about choices. It's a phenomenon that started brewing about 10 years ago with just a handful of small craft breweries around Chicago. They started making drinks called stouts and porters and blondes. Now, Chicago's beer industry is overflowing and catching the eye and the envy of the nation's big beer companies. In Chicago, watering holes like Vice District Brewing are cranking out beers to meet every taste and budget. Vice, now nearly 2 years old, is a microbrewery and tap room in the South Loop. Co-owners Curtis Tarver and Quentin Cole consider themselves craft beer geeks. Like many craft beer novices, the pair learned by brewing at home.
We started home brewing just different recipes and enjoyed it, quite frankly. And next thing you know, we're kind of hanging out at the house in our respective basements across the street. He would keep, 3 beers on tap. I keep 4 beers on tap, and we just invite people to come to our basement and celebrate with us.
Tarver and Cole made the transition from their homes to this location, where they serve more than 14 house-made beers weekly.
Amanda, our head brewer, makes efficient use of this space, this limited space. This is where all the magic happens. There's nothing sexy about it. I'll be honest with you, this is the unsexy part about beer.
So we try to keep about 5 to 6 staple beers, right? So we start with a blonde ale, which is one of our lighter beers. To the other end, a double IPA, right? Which is gonna be a much hoppier beer, right? A lot of aroma. It's gonna kind of punch you in the face, quite frankly, when you get near it. But it's a really solid beer. What we try to do is to keep beers for people who may not be into the craft beer space, and then some for people who are in the space, both feet. They've jumped in and they want to taste the most flavorful thing they can.
It can be very difficult to know what separates one beer from another in terms of style. The easiest way to think about it is to divide them into their 2 overarching categories, lagers and ales. Lagers in general tend to be lighter and cleaner in flavor and mouthfeel. Pilsners are a great example of a lager style. Ales in general tend to be heavier in flavor, and a lot of times, especially here in the States, will be darker in color. Porters, stouts, and India Pale Ales are great examples of this category.
Bruce White runs the Chicago Beer Experience. 3 times a week, he gives group tours to those interested in learning about craft beer.
We explore a lot of Chicago history, and we kind of have a beer tie-in there as well. And then, of course, we taste and learn about craft beer during that time. Welcome to Buddy Guys. This place is awesome. Chicago has had a rich beer history. Even back in the 1800s, we had 54 breweries in the city. 53 of them were run by Germans. Chicago was definitely a big brewing city back in those days. Before the craft beer movement, between 1978 and 1988, no breweries existed in the city, which third largest city in the country. That's pretty ridiculous.
Thanks to trend-setting local breweries including Goose Island, Half Acre, and Revolution, Chicago's craft beer scene is exploding and helped push national sales past $22 billion in 2015.
These days in craft beer, there's a lot of 1- and 2-year-old breweries that have opened up that are doing new things, and they're bringing new beers and new flavors and tastes to the table, which is important.
Josh Death is managing partner at Revolution Brewing in Logan Square, the largest independent brewery in Illinois. When Revolution opened 6 years ago, it was brewing about 2,000 barrels of beer. Last year, Revolution brewed more than 60,000 barrels.
We definitely had high double-digit growth for a while in our sales. Right now we sell 90% of our beer here in the Chicagoland area, but we're starting to sell in other states around the country.
Beer sales in Chicago last year were $545 million.
Of that $545 million in 2015, craft beer sales account for a large percentage. Major beer companies began noticing the high sales craft brewers were pulling in, took note of the possibilities, and in some cases bought up the smaller competitors. Anheuser-Busch, the nation's biggest brewer, bought Chicago's Goose Island Brewery for $8.8 million. Heineken bought a 50% stake in Lagunitas Brewing Company, which has a large brewery in Chicago.
I think the big brewers like Anheuser-Busch, they definitely see craft beer as a threat, whereas they used to be able to ignore it, think it was like a little fly, and they would just flick it away 10 years ago. And now they've decided that they can't make it themselves, so they're going to go ahead and buy it and join them that way.
Buying bread from a man in Brazil. Well, he was 6'4" and full of muscle.
The business of craft beer has now become a thriving culture. Craft beer festivals, races, and even yoga classes are popping up around the city. Josh Siegel runs the Chicago Ale Fest.
Chicago Ale Fest is a 2-day American craft beer festival that takes place at Buckingham Fountain. It's one of the larger craft beer festivals in the city. We'll bring in over 100 different brewers, 220 different beers, live music, local food, all in one place.
I made sure to come here this year, just to have a chance to taste the various beers and experience it. And it's also part of being in Chicago. Chicago's really embracing the craft brewing and the craft beer industry. So I just wanted to be a part of that.
Craft beer festivals are all about the experience. And don't get me wrong, you have to have great craft beer at a craft beer festival, but really it comes down to the experience.
And that experience is one Josh Death does not see tapping out anytime soon.
It's not a bubble that's going to burst. It's not like people are suddenly going to start switching back to drinking Pabst Blue Ribbon after they've been drinking craft beer IPAs. It's like once you get that flavor on your taste buds, it's hard to go back.
And if you need any more evidence of the city's craft beer craze, Mayor Emanuel has announced a series of summer beer festivals on Friday nights, 6 festivals between June and August, held in some of the city's neighborhood craft beer hubs. And as we conclude tonight's show, we would like to thank our production team here at WYCC for yet another terrific season. Each week, this talented group works hard to bring you stories you won't see anywhere else. Here's to them. And we'll see you next time on In the Loop. Thanks for joining us. I'm Chris Bury. Good night.